While we're at this, hello everybody, by the way, on YouTube. While we're at this, I just want to duplicate like a particle system or two over. And then we'll be ready to go for the actual like modeling thing that we're going to be doing here. For the boss fight that's going to be in this exact same area. I just need to add in a couple of particle systems here to well, make it less obvious that there's like a very ugly cutoff in where these materials all start and stuff like that. So just gotta place these in the right positions. And you know, this ain't great. But we'll make do. Let's see if we make them a little bit smaller. That'll work for now. That'll work well enough, I think. Ideally, of course, what we would do is we would set a couple of user parameters here for like the spawn amount and such. I know that's not what the stream is gonna be, so maybe I shouldn't sit around that long here to do that, but let's just add a couple of user parameters like a float for the spawn rate, and then a float for the minimum size, and a float for the maximum size. That should be all that we need, and then we can finally get started here. So we want to set our spawn rate, spawn rate default for that would be 1500, and then for initialize particle we want to set the uniform scale to the minimum size to the maximum size. That's max size. So we have, I think there were like 20 and 50 a moment ago, something like that. And now if we compile and save that, in theory, we should now have, yeah, there we go. So we can make these a little bit smaller, something like 10 to 25 maybe. Well, actually, I think maybe 20 to 40 and then just some less of them. So let's go down to like 1,000 for this one. These ones, maybe we can go like 7 to 18. And also position this one a little bit better. That's not even close to centered. Holy hell. I think that's just 111 maybe. I also don't think that really matters for right now, but we'll do. We'll make do. That works well enough, and let's just copy that over. There's a lot of fine-tuning and polishing up there that we can do, but that's not really what we're working on today. So that's, oh, I closed my YouTube chat. No, I don't want that. Welcome back. Right now I was just working on like this little thing that I have over here. There's gonna need a lot more work to be done on this. But we're gonna be changing over now to Blender, this thing that we're actually going to be doing, which is, remember last week when I got started on this model and I had like these little bits of cloth to test out? We're going to like actually properly do that now, because last time we had some temporary solution to it. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to first mock up like in just poly editing the rough shape, and then we're going to go into the sculpting mode and actually do all of the finer details for it. So we start here, say, hey, we have a cylinder. Let's go into editing mode here and make that cylinder a little bit smaller. Maybe actually first add a couple of loop cuts in. Good day to you too. Hopefully everybody is doing fine this lovely day. I'll just move things about a little bit in editing mode, like pre-sculpting. Let's call this pre-sculpting because it sounds a lot more impressive than just moving things around. And then we probably want to move this up like a fair bit, right? And then inset this and extrude this upward. That's actually pretty perfect. Wow. So that'll be the rough shape of the like the cloak that we have. Maybe I'll I don't know, maybe pull this up a little bit more still so that we can see a little bit more of the ribs. We want to get this rough shape pretty decent, at least. Oh, the inside here doesn't have multiple. Oh, that's an issue. We'll remesh this anyway. The topology doesn't matter. It's just a little annoying to move things around. Oh, and now things are clipping through itself. Okay. That's not ideal. Let's just stick with this for now, because again, it's just a rough block out, right? So then we add a UV sphere. Actually, the thing that we did last time was a pretty good starting point, so I don't know why I removed that. Mostly to make a point, I suppose. And we just move this like that, and a little bit like that. Do we need symmetry for this actually? Maybe, but maybe not. I don't think this shape itself is going to be necessarily all too difficult to work with. It's mostly the detailing that we're going to be doing here, and for that I don't think we necessarily need the symmetry. Matter of fact, it's probably better if we don't have symmetry for a lot of detailing. That's eventually going to like get baked down into a normal map, of course. We also don't want those little spine things sticking through, though. So that's a decent way to get started here. And then we pull this back a little bit, and that's a goofy looking start. We can work with that. Now, the cloth on the arms is going to be the actually difficult thing to deal with. So maybe we just like don't do that yet. One thing that I have decided that I actually want to do is I want to, I'll have to show you real quick. I want to add like a couple of toruses here. You might be thinking, why the fuck do you want to add toruses? Because that doesn't seem very useful. You might be thinking, why the hell is it on his elbow? Or you might be thinking, oh, actually, no, that is a cool idea. That makes a lot of sense. So what we'll be doing here is we'll be adding some toruses here as like cloth that's holding together these joints. I think I'll like that idea. So then we just duplicate that and rotate this around in a couple of axes. Don't need proportional editing for this. Rotate the Y? No, in the Z. I would much prefer if this would rotate median point. There we go. Like something like that. And of course, at the moment they're clipping through each other, and they're still going to be clipping through each other a little bit as we go forward. But if we do a little bit of that on this side, a little bit of that, we'll work on like some more detailing to make it feel a little bit less like he's got donuts around his arm and more like those are like wrapped bandages or something like that. But that's the basic idea that I like came up with today. So we'll just mirror that. Mirror. And in theory, if we do that, yeah, it should show up on that side as well. I'm a fan of your videos. Why don't you call them devlogs? Everyone does that. Because it's just a view thing. I am actually like the edited video for next month. So the first Monday of April. I'm going to do a video more specifically like more devlog style. Like this is what I've been doing the last couple of months. There's the progress that we've made for the game specifically. Aside from that, like tutorials aren't really devlogs, and the things that are more devlog style, I tend to present in different ways, like the 5 ways to improve combat, right? For the 5 ways to improve combat, that is effectively a devlog, because it's like, this is what I've learned about animation. And a little bit about like timing and like game feedback and feel and stuff like that. But calling a devlog number like 17 combat animation makes people just simply less likely to click on it. Instead of it looking like a standalone video and also working as a standalone video. So that's mostly the reason that I don't label them as being devlogs. Because nobody's going to start watching at like part 20 of a series. That's just a sad truth of how YouTube works. That said, they are all in a playlist. For anybody who bothers checking the channel and wants to see like, hey, is there any more about this stuff? The playlist is there, so people can still watch it as a series if they want to. But I just like don't advertise it as such. Okay, and this is how we're going to be doing the rough draft for the cloth, by the way. So I'm just going to be extruding this shit out. The deadly donuts indeed. They're going to be murdering everybody. Now, this is very rough. I think it's safe to say. Let's mirror this one as well. It's mostly this one that I am very worried about how it's going to end up working. The arm cloth things. Because I don't have a very good idea as to what I really want to do with those, if I'm being like 100% honest. So I guess we'll see. I mean, I personally also like watching a lot of like long-term devlog series because it's interesting to watch a project evolve, right? And it's also interesting to watch people like just straight up give up on projects. Like that is still informative. It's just not what the numbers support, sadly. So I think I've found a pretty decent medium between... I don't know how that's going to work, to be honest with you. I think I found a pretty decent medium between them still technically like being devlogs, but also having the upside of them being watchable as standalone videos. Okay, let's get to sculpting. this is where things get really, really scary. Let's start with the hood, because the hood is the thing that I feel most comfortable about, to be honest. Which is the sphere. So let's start with this one. And this time I've actually got my tablet hooked up as well, so I can actually do stuff, which is nice. For now, let's put on symmetry just because. I want to also just immediately start with a remesh because this thing is way too low poly. Matter of fact, we might just... let's keep it at this resolution for now. We'll very likely change this to a higher resolution quite quickly. But for now, I do think that this works decently well. We want the clay brush to hollow this thing out a little. So we just hollow this out. Man, can you hear those birds? Those birds really annoyed the ever-living hell out of me. Why? This should be... Yes, it's doing that. It's just... The strength is really low for some reason. Look, I don't know if this is a... let's just go for a final detail mesh. Like, half the amount of size, it'll be 4 times the amount of vertices. I don't necessarily know that this is like the best way to make a rope for your skeleton. This is just the way that I'm doing it. Keep that in mind. Like, half the point of these live streams is showing more of a trial and error workflow compared to like... tutorials, which are always like very, very scripted, and like by the time I make a tutorial of something, for the most part, I've already done it at least once to make sure that everything that I'm about to say works. These live streams are kind of the opposite of that, which is the point, but it also means that they, like, if you're following along, there's a good chance that something's gonna go wrong. Just want to make sure everybody is on board with that. I mean, signs of nature are nice, but it's kind of annoying. Like, for these live streams, I don't really care. But for some reason, they're always... I know why, but for some reason, they're always being very loud just as I start like recording tutorials and shit. And the reason why is that generally the time I start recording tutorials is right about like after work hours, of course. So that's right about like sundown. Which is when they start making a lot of noise because I suppose they're like, hey, I'm gonna go to sleep because I'm a bird. I don't know how birds work. Let's maybe dynamic topology. Does that even work with the... I don't even think that the deform brushes do anything with dynamic topology, if I'm being honest. Yeah, I think we want to just... Oh, we can't remesh as long as dynamic topology is on, because of course we can't. I think we just need more geometry again. So let's set this to... Let's just set this to 1 centimeter. There's going to be very, very dense geometry most likely, but at least we'll have a lot of geometry to work with. Right? So there's that. And we'll also smooth things out a little bit before we move on. Is that clipping through itself, or is that clipping through... That's clipping through itself. I don't love that. But we can quite easily fix that by just inflating this a little bit, which is probably a good thing to begin with, honestly. inflating this and smoothing it out. And we inflate it again. We smooth it out again. So we have a little bit more substance to work with as we pull this geometry around and inward a little. Now we can smooth things out again. And now once we have that, we can go back to like multi-plane scrape a little bit to... I don't even know that multi-plane scrape is what I was going for. But that's still a nice effect. But what I was going for was pinching. Where's pinching? There's a pinching. Scrape, fill, crease, thumb. Am I going insane? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm breathing right into the microphone. I could have sworn there was a pinching brush. Am I confusing ZBrush and Blender now? I might be. Like, pinching seems very important to have in sculpting. So I don't know. I mean, I guess multi-scrape plane can... Oh, pinch. There we go. Never mind. I'm just an idiot. I feel like every tutorial needs a tutorial. I just got stuck. I mean, that's also just a... What the... No, don't crash. Don't crash. Oh, it's just my cursor. my pen was messing up a little bit. I mean, part of following tutorials is also, like, having some base knowledge, which is why I try to personally strike a balance between, like, having tutorials that are, like, building entire features, such as, like, the double jump tutorial, or the more encompassing speech. The more all-encompassing things like the gameplay ability system course or the tutorials that I'm doing for the what's it called, the inventory right now. But also try to cover like more basic shit, just like this feature exists and this is what it does, because that also like is quite important to understand. Okay, so for now, let's keep it at that, and we're gonna go for the cylinder next, because this is actually the one that I'm more excited about doing. We might as well just start with a very fine detail right away. Looks like that's rough. Okay, so the first thing we want to do probably is just like pull this down so not everything is as even. I don't believe that we have... Yeah, the remesh just straight up didn't work on this? What the hell? Oh, it's back to 0.1 meters. Let's set this to 0.04 something, I don't know. That's more detail. Good, good, good. Gives me a little bit more to work with here. Just make this a little bit more droopy, right? Maybe even a grab brush would work better than elastic deform. Like grab with a good fall off, I think, is better for this kind of thing. Now, what do we do for this? I didn't really think this through too much. No, this is the... Well, it's not technically the second boss because you can fight the bosses and whatever order that you want. But I already have the tutorial boss, which that is the first boss, and then from there there's not really an order to them. And that's the... you've probably seen it in some of the thumbnails of previous live streams, and if not, they're easy to find. It's the like armored knight is the first one. This is just like one of the main bosses of the game itself. I don't know that this is going too well. Let's... okay, let me think for a second, because there's gonna be an issue here with the cloth physics in engine. And I don't know how I'm gonna fix them again. I've had this issue before. Because I'm now realizing, right, that what I really want is for this not to actually move that much. So maybe what I want is for this to all be pulled up a little bit, and then just have like strips of cloth hanging from the ribs that are more simulated. I think that makes more sense. Because the alternative would be having this come all the way down below the ribs themselves, and at which point, like, we've spent an hour like last week making those ribs for no reason, because nobody's going to see them. Which already is kind of the case with like the way the ribs connect to the spine, but yeah, he's based on Grim Reaper. He's even got like a massive fuck off scythe that he's gonna wield. So if we make this a little bit tighter and then a little bit more like that. Then we can worry about those little strips of cloth a little bit later. Which gets us to this thing, and this is where I really start worrying. So the first thing we do is remesh the ever-living hell out of this, because this is going to need detail. So we're just going to go right into 2 centimeters right away. And we will just smooth that out. We will also turn off mirror, because the mirror modifier, I think, is making this particularly slow. So let's turn that off for now and just do this one side first, because this might still be quite slow, if I'm being honest with you. Yeah, maybe I give this a little bit too much geometry. We'll figure it out, I'm sure. First, I need to make this feel more rounded, like a lot more fucking rounded. I guess I could make the cloak transparent. Yeah, I could. It's actually a pretty good idea. Like, make this part of the thing see-through so you can still see the ribs. It's potentially interesting, but just seeing a couple of ribs like poke out down there might be enough for me. I guess we'll see. But that's a good idea to keep in mind. I also think that we want to remesh this at a lower resolution first to get a rough shape. I think I went a little bit overboard there. So let's go for like 5 centimeters. Wait, did that remesh already? I don't know that it did. We are making this a lot more rounded very easily now, though, so I guess we did remesh. And really all that this is supposed to be is just like some strips of cloth coming off that will... You know what? Actually, I don't think they're going to go down all the way to the wrist. I think they're going to tie... hold on. I was going to say, I think they're going to tie down into like those elbow things, and that's going to be it. But we could also do both. We could do both of those things. Like one of those, they're not mutually exclusive in the slightest. Are they? Like we could just bunch them up under here a little bit. At which point, definitely, this looks a little iffy. We'll work on that in a moment. Or just right now, apparently. But that might make it a little bit more grounded as well. The fact that they're like tied up in those knots like that. And we can snake hook a little bit in a moment as well. And yeah, I know things are clipping through each other, but we're never going to see it this up close, probably. Maybe we will. I'm going to pretend like we won't for now. And if we do, I'll worry about that when we come to that. It's always a good mindset to have, isn't it? Can I just say, hey, orbit point, thank you. There might be an easier way to do that, like putting the 3D cursor there. That's probably actually like the way you're supposed to do that, now that I think about it. It's probably not going to be as good as the concept art, because the concept art is just ChatGPT generated, so I doubt it's going to come out like that impressive. It's just like more for general vibes and like ID generation and stuff like that. Okay, let's take these and say, hey, we want to duplicate all this and move them down to like the wrist area. Because we're going to do the same thing here, so that we also have a place to... That's actually placed pretty well, not going to lie. Kind of impressed with myself. So that we have a place to like tie up those things as well. And then the only things that really need cloth physics are the bits that aren't tied up. So that's probably going to help with the whole cloth physics sim quite a bit. Because it's going to have like anchor points. So it's not just going to be hanging about. Rather than trying to make a rope that is 100% only driven by cloth physics. Because I tried to do that before with with the normal enemy variant of this. And well, that thing's got redesigned as well. Because the exact same reasons that I'm redesigning this guy now. And that is, cloth physics are a little bit less of a, hey, this will just fix my problems kind of thing than I would have maybe hoped. Which is fair because, like, nothing is just a magical fix ever, right? That's just, like, not how that works. Specifically in, like, real-time stuff, like game development as well. Probably, like, don't bank on the fact that something that you don't fully understand is going to... bail you out, because it's not. Well, it might sometimes, but for the most part it probably won't. Like, that kind of works, doesn't it? There needs to be a lot more work that needs to be done here. But I think this kind of like gets the basic idea across. Again, this is just going to be clipping. There's not going to be one mesh. Maybe it should be one mesh. Maybe it should be one mesh. We can always join them together and remesh them later. Well, now if we're going to do that, we probably should decide that now. Yeah, let's make it all one mesh. So apply this. At this point we can join them all together. Because we've got the basic shapes of everything alright. So I think it's pretty reasonable to now say, hey, go back into sculpting mode and we're going to remesh this. And this is going to join everything together. So we can smooth things out a little bit more. And now everything is just one mesh. Which means that it'll like properly deform and stuff like that as well. Hopefully I'm not going to regret making that decision. And now I guess we do a little detailing, don't we? And then rigging. Not looking forward to that bit. Can say that for free. The easiest way to add detailing to a thing that's supposed to be cloth is just using the cloth brush. Sometimes. Sometimes it's not. You know what we're going to do, actually? Before we do anything else, let's save. Maybe I should do this in ZBrush. Blender's really starting to, like, fall apart a little bit. Because it's literally not doing anything when I try to use the cloth here. Aside from crashing. Oh, no, it is actually adding detail. It is actually adding detail. So let's just say, hey, we want to go back to slightly rougher material or geometry rather. Maybe we can somewhat more real-time-ish do this like cloth thing. And this should be like drooping the opposite direction. I think this might be a little too low res again, to be honest. Let's try a happy middle ground of 2 centimeters. Did that remesh? I think it might have. Yeah, we're definitely slower now. Now that we're detailing, we probably don't want to have the symmetry on anymore either. There we go. Pull this down a little. I really like the cloth brush, but my god is it slow. Like, honestly, how are you supposed to work with this? Because even now, you can see that, like, there's not enough geometry to really, like, do anything with this. And it's slow as all hell. And this is really where, again, ZBrush comes in. Because ZBrush is much better to dealing with high-res geometry. Like, this just isn't doing anything. Like, this is not even close to real time. It's very hard to get any usable feedback out of this. That's the wrong key. If we go into object mode real quick and we say auto shade smooth, like this looks like shit. Never mind, we're not going to do this in here this way because this just straight up just refuses to work properly. Like, this is just not... It's just not good. It's just absolutely fucking shit. You know what? Maybe with dynamic topology, the cloth brush will work decently well. That's actually a pretty decent idea. Let's remesh this to a... to like be more chunky. And then we can dynamic topology. And maybe that'll do some more for us. Except that I don't think maybe the cloth broth... The cloth broth? the cloth brush does not do anything with dynamic topology, probably. It seems like, so that's not great either. Or maybe it's just like a scale thing? No, it just doesn't do anything with it. Well, fuck me then. Okay, I guess in that case we add geometry through doing this. Okay, I've got an idea. So if we use this to add some geometry, we now have final geometry to work with in the areas that we need it. We can then smooth that out a little bit. And then maybe use the brush on this. So go back to cloth. I mean, it's not horrible. It's not great. Still considering just exporting this as like a lower poly mesh and moving this to ZBrush at the moment. But I want to try doing this in Blender. And you know what? This is actually, like, again, very unresponsive. But it could be worse. Could be a lot worse. This is actually going somewhere now. And where it is going is down. Like literally, because gravity. That's what we're sculpting here. Imagine if I didn't have a cloth brush and I had to like make all of this detail by hand just by drawing it on. That would be insane. That's how things used to be, like a long time ago. I don't know when like the idea of a cloth brush was first developed, probably fairly early on in like 3D sculpting. I don't know the history of all this kind of stuff too well. But I imagine that this is not the kind of thing that people were very keen on doing by hand. Then again, seeing how much geometry you need to make this work and how fucking shit this is in responsiveness, maybe like you actually need some decently powerful computer to run a brush like this. So it might be a somewhat more recent thing. I don't know. It's always like the place in the top where the different directions come from that ends up looking like flat, which, I mean, it makes sense that it looks flat, right? Because, of course, if you're pulling fabric into different directions, the place that it's getting pulled from is going to look flat. But that doesn't mean that I like it looking flat, so let's try to avoid that. Also, just adding some more geometry definitely helps. And just like going a little bit back and forth on the top here, also huge help. I think that does the trick well enough for the most part. Let's worry about the arms now. I think the way this probably works best is like bottom to top, right? So we add the geometry where we need them, which is on this surface. We smooth it out a little bit. And then we go bottom to top, because that is the way that all those like little wrinkles stay decently in place. Because that's the way those wrinkles would realistically have come into being through mostly an effort of gravity. Inflate this a little bit. Is cloth just C? No, of course it's not. Which one is it? Shift spacebar. Shift spacebar 6. Okay, that's intuitive. No. You know, this could be worse. Hello, there's 17 people watching apparently. You all got nothing better to do on a Tuesday evening? Because I certainly don't. Welcome. It's just me rambling and drawing on a skeleton. Hopefully it's entertaining. Hopefully it's maybe somewhat useful as well. I don't know. Could be. Half the reason that I live stream this stuff is so that it actually gets done. Because otherwise, don't smooth that out. No! Don't do that. I guess we're not smoothing that out. Maybe it actually looks better if we don't smooth it out. I'm gonna pretend like that's the case so that I don't have to worry about it. You know, I say that. One day we will be a skeleton. Yeah, that's a thought. It's kind of depressing. Hopefully not anytime too soon, because I'm way too busy to die. If I die now, that would be really inconvenient. So I would really rather not. Like if we can avoid me dying, I'd appreciate that. I don't know if I personally like if you're looking if you're looking for somebody who knows what they're doing, specifically in Blender, I've got bad news for you. Like 90% of what I do in Blender is just fucking about. I don't nearly use Blender enough to feel like I know what I'm doing. Still, if watching me fuck about is useful, I'm glad that it is, but I also have no idea what the fuck I'm doing half the time. Watching the guides on gas and initial C++ setup. Couldn't I use Blueprint for everything besides certain calculations that are more than one variable? Yeah, no, the idea behind game playability system very much is that you do it that way. You set up a couple of things like your attribute sets and stuff like that in C++ because they're so variable as to which things are inside them. I suppose they didn't want to bother making that blueprint compatible, which is kind of too bad, but I also understand it because you're like, it's not exactly like you're just adding like float variables to a class, right? It's a little bit more involved than that, so that makes a certain amount of sense to me. So those attribute sets you set up in C++, it's also nice to set up those components, like the ability system component itself, on your actors in C++, but I think you can just add those through Blueprint if you really wanted to. But the reason you add those through C++ is so that you can have the C++ interface to like the get ability system components function. And then only some more advanced calculations that like the modifier magnitude or magnitude modifier calculation and the execution calculation something along those lines anyway. I don't, off the top of my head, know what they're called, or C++, but aside from that, like the actual gameplay abilities, you can make them in C++ if you want to, but they're very much like, the idea behind the plugin is that we get the programmers to set up a couple of things in C++, and then like gameplay designers can just use Blueprint to do all of the like actual like ability work through Blueprint, and having things very much like tied together through gameplay tags and that kind of stuff. So yeah, you can and probably should be doing a lot of that in Blueprint, because that is the way it is intended to be used, I would say. Not to say that you can not use things in unintended ways. Like, just because it's intended to be used one way doesn't mean that you have to use it in that way, of course. If you prefer using C++ for that, be my guest. There's no real thing stopping you there. You know, that actually looks pretty decent. That does look pretty decent, doesn't it? Like, not great yet, but like, I'm not unhappy about it. So now I think we want to start modeling on these little fuckers. Holy shit, that looks horrible now. Without shade smooth, that looks fucked. We're going to shade it smooth anyway, it doesn't matter. That's just, it took me a little taken aback, that's all. So whenever I want to add a new stat to say armor, I would have to do that through C++. Same with calculation, but to actually apply that into an action or ability, that can do, that you can do through Blueprint. So it's only the setup for the attributes themselves, and taking in more complicated things. So for calculation. So when you, for instance, just want to like subtract a attack value from like not enemy one. If you have like your player and an enemy, and your player has let's actually not remesh that. That's a really good point. Hold on, I'll get back to that thought in a moment. I wanna subdiv this first. Can I apply this in sculpt mode? Can I? Guess we're about to find out. We can. Okay, back on track here. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, you've got a player and an enemy, and let's say that the player has an attack value and the enemy has a defense value. Just doing like and an HP value. Just doing, actually no, maybe, yeah, at that point you have 3 values, so you need to make a custom calculation, I believe. Well, you don't need to, but you probably will want to. Because if you just have the attack value, you can just say, hey, HP attribute, take the attack value off of it, and you can even like do some math with that, like based on like levels and stuff. But if you then also have a defense value that you need to be calculated into that as well, so at that point you have like defense or attack minus defense equals damage, and that is then getting subtracted from the HP. Like, that gets a little bit more involved already. Once you get into stuff like that is where you need to start like setting up custom calculation classes in C++. There might be a way to get around this specific example in Blueprint, but does become a little clunky very quickly to stick with Blueprint for just calculation. So, for example, in my game, what I have is my enemies have both a... One moment. Can I just say... Automask topology. There we go. In my game, my enemies all have a defense bar and an HP bar, meaning that I have to go through like a defense stat first. I can show you in a moment how that works. I have to go through a defense stat first, and as long as they have defense points left, I always only deal 1 HP damage. And then when their defense runs out, then I start doing damage to their HP, right? So I have their defense bar. I've got my own strength stat. I've got the damage stat that the weapon that I have at the moment carries. So that's like taking in 4 values to calculate changes to 2 values. At that point, you're going to set up your own custom calculation classes to make all of that work, because otherwise, like, that's not something that you really can do with just the Blueprint side of things. Again, there's roundabout ways of working around that, but at that point, it is probably literally just easier to learn what the C++ code does than bother around with all that. Okay, so now let's try to remesh this. I actually like that it is connected up in a couple places now. Like, that's entirely an accident, but that works out fantastically. Once you finish up all this modeling, how do you personally optimize the mesh to be brought into Unreal, or do you not worry about that? For this, I'm going to have to worry about that, because if we go back into the layout mode here, I'm working with about 10 million triangles at the moment, which is not gonna be great. A lot of that is the skull itself. The skull itself is like 4.5 million. For anything that needs to like deform, I manually retopologize when I have to. It's a tedious job and I'm not very good at it, so I prefer not to. For anything that doesn't have to deform and just like move as a unit, which is mostly everything here. So all of the like skeleton bits, they don't need to like stretch and squash and stuff like that, because they're bones, right? So they're not going to be, they're going to be moving as a whole. So for that, what I do is I just go in here, if they are high poly, which in this case, like this very much is not, so I don't worry about it. But these things are a little bit more high poly, right? Like a little unnecessarily so. So what I do is I just go into the modifiers and add a decimate modifier. And that just, if I go into wireframe now, we can see keep it on collapse. This is the original geometry, and if I set the ratio here now to like 0.2 or something like that, it's the wrong fucking object that I added it to. Hold on. 1 moment. Right. Decimate modifier. If I set this to like 0.2 now, why the fuck does it do it to the wrong object? A little confused about that, not gonna lie. Oh, it's because I already had the thing selected. Okay, hold on. decimate modifier. We'll get there eventually. We will get there eventually. Set that to something like, that's way too low, like 0.2. Which means that I'm now at like 20% of the original geometry of this object. So we can even like go to like 5% maybe. That's a little too low. But 0.1 is pretty reasonable. So now if I go back into the normal view, you can see that this is still pretty good. But we have dropped from about 50,000 faces to about 9,000 when I add that decimate modifier. And this is horrible topology that it then creates, right? Because it's just creating the most optimized geometry to keep the same shape, and that geometry doesn't necessarily take into account that it needs to deform as well. But if your object doesn't need to deform, that is fine. So that's... And it's a lot faster than doing a manual retopology. So that's how I deal with... Why does my... Oh, that's why I was having trouble before. My USB cable is all kinds of fucked up for my tablet. Hold on. Will you stay now? No, of course you won't. I need to get a new USB cable. I'm not going to search for one right now on stream, but next time I definitely... Fuck off! This might be an issue. I'm going to be real with you. Don't touch the cable anymore. It works again. Anyway, that's the basic idea of how I deal with that. And like manual retopology, it's a little bit like much to go over right now, but it's a thing that you can do. Let's add in a little bit more geometry with dynamic topology. Like add just a little texture to this as well. And what's also important is that I'm not going to like throw away the high detail mesh, because why would you make all this high detail stuff to then just make like low detail version of them, right? And that is because when I like move this over to Substance Painter to do all the textures, you import the high detail mesh along with the low detail mesh that you're actually going to be using in Engine. And Substance Painter very nicely just generates a normal map for all of the like geometry detail that we have here. That will project onto the low poly version. So like a lot of this stuff over here is not actually going to be in the geometry for the final version. That's just going to be used to generate a normal map for that. That's specifically for the dynamic meshes or skeletal meshes. Because if we're talking about things like static meshes, I most of the time just don't care and I enable Nanite in Unreal Engine. Because that kind of just takes care of that, and by the time I release literally anything on like Steam or anything, it'll be another like year or two probably. At which point like SSDs already are pretty standard to have in most modern systems. By the time I get around to releasing this thing, I would assume that most people just straight up like have SSDs in their system at all times. Which is a requirement to have Nanite run properly. Is the game needs to be running off an SSD because you're streaming virtual geometry right off the disk, which hard drives don't like. They're just not fast enough to do that. So that's my tangent on that. Hydrate or no follow? Okay, I will drink. Now you gotta fucking follow me, okay? I'm so bad at looking at Twitch chat, I'm sorry. Learning C++, new to the language. Yeah, it can be a bit of a pain to get into. The gameplay ability system is... it feels unfinished. And I think Epic really wants you to think that as by design so that you can extend it for yourself. And that is an argument to be made there. I just don't think that it's a particularly strong argument. I just think that they never finished it, if I'm being real with you. Like, there's definitely, like, there's blueprint functions for, like, magnitude modifiers calculations. They just don't work in Blueprint because they take in parameters that you can't get in Blueprint. Like, that is just dumb. So there's definitely room for improvement. But I also, like, at some level, get that there's so much going on with, like, getting specific, like, custom data and stuff. And Blueprint is... like, in the end, limited in doing that in some ways. Like, very little, but it is. Have I inflated this thing enough by now? Probably not, right? You know what we'll do? I am an idiot. I will just turn off this... one of these. There we go. If I just turn off all of these, I can actually, like, just sculpt on the inside of these things, which is what I need to do. Oh, that right in my face. Okay, what does this look like now? Maybe that's good. Let's try to do the cloth brush thing again. What does the wireframe look? Oh, there's a lot of detail there. That should be enough for the cloth brush, I imagine. What if we say, hey, I want to go into object mode and I want to see what this thing looks like when we auto shade smooth. That's quite a relevant piece of information to have. And then it's immediately going to... oh, hold on. I don't think we actually do want it to shade smooth, do we? Because that is what is causing those visual glitches to a certain extent. Maybe? I don't know. We'll worry about that later. I just need to have this feel like bunched up cloth so that it can feel a little bit like a bandage. My god, I need to readjust my sitting position real quick because I was sitting on my leg and, like, now it feels like it's dying. That's actually not too... oh, just don't look at the inside. Just don't look at the inside. But the outside looks fine. It's just the inside looks like something went horribly wrong. We can smooth that out, that's fine. Which also actually does make the outside look a little better, I think. Maybe? Not really. Just wishful thinking. I think this will do. Let's turn this back on. But that's a lot more detailed than the actual cloth itself. So let's go back into object mode and see if we just turn this back to, like, shade flat. That looks pretty decent. And this is the... Oh, this is the shade smooth version. Hold on, what the fuck? No, it's not. Okay, good. It's auto shade smooth, so just some angles are being a little fucky. Turn on the skeleton itself as well to see if anything is clipping through there. I actually think that that is a pretty good... Like, there's a little bit that we can move around here still, let's see. But aside from that, that's actually pretty good. How about we turn off the topology thing? Why the fuck are you not moving the inside faces at this point? Like that, why? It's because elastic deform. Using the wrong brush. With grab, that is fixed, okay. Okay, this is gonna be a little annoying to get properly tight, but it does need to be. That actually ain't too bad. That actually works pretty well. Okay. Is RTX 3050 8GB enough for Unreal? I have a 2060 6GB. And it's mostly a VRAM issue for me. So if you have more VRAM than me, you're probably fine. Like you're one SKU lower but one generation newer than me, so that should balance out decently well. I think like 30 series was a pretty big upgrade from 20 series, right? Now 40 series again was a pretty big upgrade back to back. Because like 10 to 20 I don't believe was that big a deal. Aside from the fact that we like have like tensor cores and ray tracing cores and stuff like that. So yeah, I think a 3050 should probably be fine. But I'm not entirely like 100% on it. I'm a little like maybe, probably, but like not for sure. I mean, if it runs on a 1060. That said though, like I run out of VRAM because I'm also running a lot of 4K textures at the moment. If I just open up Unreal here for a moment, and I have a lot of stuff loaded at the same time. So at the moment I'm like 1GB over budget. I think the budget by default is set to 4GB. I think you can change that somewhere, but if I just go into like my task manager real quick, I think at this point it's probably just using pretty much all my VRAM. There's a little wiggle room, not that much. But that's also with like literally everything loaded into memory, which includes like the textures for these bricks and the textures for these skulls. And the textures for like literally everything in my game is loaded at the moment. So that's not great. And it does fine. And as you can see, like there's quite a bit of content here that it is just all loading in at once. So the moment I like unload everything in the tutorial area, for instance, it actually doesn't make that much of a difference, seemingly, which is surprising. But then when I unload the dungeon that I was working on, I only have like this streaming level enabled. You can see that it's dropping a little bit, like performance is increasing. So even like 4GB probably will be fine. I'm really happy with the way the arena looks, and I also really like I was doing this just before the stream started today, right? I was working on like this blood fountain, and there's definitely like room for improvement here. Some parts of it look a little janky. But for the most part, I actually think that this looks pretty decent. Like, this is pretty lit. Initially, and like still to this moment, like the actual water here does move, I think it might be fine if it just doesn't move because there's so many moving parts to this at this point. Just having like a see-through plane will probably do, but that's not what we're working on here today. I'm distracting myself. Let's get back to clay strip dynamic topology. Yeah. So we can add some geometry here. Actually, I have an idea. Let's make a new texture. Clouds texture, size. Just to give this thing more texture off the bat, right? Just works a little bit nicer. And I think this is like the contrast, maybe? No, that's just in the colors. So we can add a little bit more contrast. Okay, so a little bit more contrast, not that much. Just adds a nice little touch of texture to what I'm sculpting. And necessarily adds more detailed geometry, which is kind of the reason that we're doing this in the first place. So inventory second part will be on Saturday, and then I believe starting that Monday or the Monday after that, they're going to be, I hate my USB cable, they're going to be twice a week. So for the moment, it's a only Saturday thing because I'm also like burning through quite a lot of shorts that I made in order to get YouTube shorts like in parity with the TikTok uploads. Once those are all like lined up and I don't have any back burner YouTube shorts anymore, I will use the Monday upload slot for the inventory series as well. So it's going to be either starting next Monday or the Monday after that is when it will start uploading on Monday and Saturdays. But part 2 is going to go up on Saturday for now. Okay, let's move things around a little bit because we need to. And I don't know, I don't think this brush has a texture. No, it doesn't. It can use a texture though, it seems like, which is an interesting thought. Let's leave it at that for now. It's an interesting thought. No, I don't want to go in edit mode. I want to go into sculpting mode. Just to pull all this in a little bit more. I'll switch back over to this one. How do we look for like a wireframe? I think that's pretty dense geometry. I think that's pretty good to start cloth physics with. Yeah, it's going to be a pretty long series. I initially, like after doing the gameplay ability system series, which is like 12 episodes long, I was like, okay, let's do something fun and quick before I start the next big thing. Which is like after the inventory series is done, I can just tell you that right now. I'm going to do, finally, I promised I'd do that like half a year ago. I'm going to do a series to like the basics and introductions of Unreal's material system. It's not going to be like super in-depth, but that in and of itself is also going to have like a shit ton of episodes because there's just a lot to cover there. So I thought, okay, before we dive into something that's going to be another very big series, let's do something small and simple like an inventory system. And then I've already finished recording the entire thing. And it's like 13 episodes. Like the total runtime of the entire thing is close to 3.5 hours. So yeah, that whole idea of let's do something quick and easy to just have a little bit of like a calm down period between gameplay ability and materials, that didn't end up working out too well for me. Because this thing actually ended up being longer than gameplay ability. Believe it or not. And then the materials also is probably going to be a fair bit longer, I imagine, because it's just so much to it. Okay, so now let's go back to our sphere, which is the robe itself. And on this side, I don't know why, probably because symmetry wasn't enabled or something. This is still floating about a little too much, so we just need to grab this and pull this in a little bit. There being somewhat of a difference between these two actually is not that big a deal. Matter of fact, might actually just be straight up a good thing. Like, we don't want this to be too symmetrical, of course. Okay. Let's save. And now we're gonna snake hook some like extra things out a little bit, which will probably... What is the geometry for this bit like? It's quite a lot. That's not really what I wanted to do, because it's not snake hook. That makes a lot of sense. Snake hook is more like this. Yeah, that's more what I want to do. And it does generate new topology there. So just gonna like be pulling out a couple of these little extra strands here. That's not what I wanted to do. Because these are going to definitely be like fully driven by cloth sim. Makes a robe look a little bit more like old and tattered rather than just hanging out. Yeah, he's a little wide, isn't he? He's like very bulky up top. But I don't think I have a lot of like wiggling room there because I made his rib cage like absolutely like gigantic. So kind of just like what we're gonna have to deal with, which is fine. If we're doing this anyway, let's try to like make this blend into the shoulder bit a little bit better as well. Oh no, I can't smooth that out, can I? Okay, let's try to be clever about this. I just want to pull these out ever so slightly so that they cover the shoulders a little bit better, without having to smooth things out, because I don't want to do all the cloth shenanigans again. Okay, I just remembered I probably also want to do some of those little snake hook things on this, right? That would make sense to do. So just like pull a couple of them out like this. This is gonna be a nightmare to paint in Unreal for the cloth physics. But man, if this works, it's gonna be really awesome. Actually, maybe don't do one there. That doesn't make a lot of sense to do one there. It'll do. It'll do. Yeah, no idea how I'm going to like weight paint a lot of this shit if I'm being real with you. This probably should have been in a T-pose. Yeah, this is the exact reason why we put things in T-poses, by the way, is because this is going to be an issue. It's going to be an issue that I end up probably dealing with at some point just fine, but it's going to be less than ideal. I don't want this to like be all that flat. I want, yeah, that's what I want. Well, it's still pretty flat, isn't it? No, gotta zoom in. That's the thing we gotta do. Zoom in. That's probably fine. I'm gonna say this is pretty much what we were looking for. Or at least this is the best I'm gonna do version of what I was looking for. So let's also take a look at the... That's not the one I was looking for. This one. We also want to change the expression on the skull itself. So let's just remove these for the time being. And then on the skull, I guess elastic deform will work best. We want to make him look a little bit more angry. This is going to take a moment to switch over. Actually, not that long. It's not even that bad. Except that we're now in object mode, so something definitely didn't go very well. Okay. So yeah, that is the exact reason that we use ZBrush. Because it just deals better with high geometry. I know I've said this like a million times throughout these live streams so far. And we've come quite a long way for this being Blender with like 10 million to... No, not dynamic topology. That's a bad idea on this. We've gone quite a long way with it being like 10 million poly in Blender. Like, frankly, I'm surprised it's not a bigger issue. I say as Blender is actively dying on me, but that's because a mistake that I made. That's not something that Blender can really be blamed for. Well, I suppose it can, because it's still shit with dealing with like this dynamic topology at these resolutions, but that's to be expected. Like, even ZBrush doesn't allow you to just generate geometry on the fly when you're sculpting. Like, you need to remesh, which it does a better and quicker job at, but that's the one thing I'll give Blender, is the way its dynamic topology works is actually like very intuitive and very nice to work with. Anyway, let's make this guy more evil. How do we make this look more evil? Maybe give him like more of a Joker smile? Pull this up a little bit. That helps. Like a little bit of a Voldemort feel. And then I don't think the Voldemort or the Joker smile is really going to do it, to be honest with you. I also think that just making the skeleton look like its mouth look evil is generally just like a difficult thing to do, probably, because that's just not the configuration that teeth are in, or a jaw. And everything has already been like unified together into one mesh, so it's also kind of difficult to... I mean, that works. But it's still kind of difficult to move things around because they're not separate meshes anymore. Maybe we make it more pointy. As a general rule of thumb, pointy is evil and round is friendly in like visual design. So anything that's triangular is usually evil. Don't go into edit mode. It's got like 5 million polygons. You idiot. It's kind of difficult to... I mean, look at this geometry. Holy fuck. It's kind of difficult to say how long I've been working on this model, because like part of this model is of course this skull, but I made the skull as a asset on its own. I mean, you can just see it if you give me a moment and let Blender like not crash, hopefully. We can save. You can just see it like in here. I already have it in engine. Like it's just this skull that I made as a standalone asset. And like I have like a fuck ton of them here. Of course, this is not the 4 million polygon version, I should point out. This is like 4,000 polygons. And they're instanced as well in this case. So that's what I originally made that skull for, knowing I was probably going to repurpose it. So depends on whether or not you count that one as part of this. Because if you do, like that took me like 3 hours to create or something. Then we had a 2-hour stream of me trying to make a design for this guy and just kind of failing. So if you want to count that as well, you can. But if we're speaking like strictly only whatever output we have here, that is, well, like these arms also we did for a different enemy. Like I'm using a lot of assets that I have just for different purpose in my game that I'm using for this guy. So if we count those as well, that's probably another like hour and something. And then the spine and ribcage itself was about an hour and a half last time. We're about an hour and a half in right now. So that would end up, if we count everything added up together, to what is that, like 7 hours? So by the time this is done, it's probably going to be closer to 10 hours. And that's likely without animation counted in, I would imagine. It kind of looks like I gave him a goatee. But I don't know, I kind of like that in a way. I just need it to be a little bit more... Ooh, that's also a neat shape. Hold on. If I do that. And then I just like... that ain't it. Dense. dense indeed. I don't know if you're talking about me or the model, but it's true either way. Let's just make this into a little bit like more of a point. And then flatten this, because this like chin bulbous thing is really weird. Like, we just can flatten that out a little bit. I'm getting slight like Jafar vibes from him now. From Aladdin, right? Wow, now especially, holy hell. Looks a little messy down there. But maybe if I can just smooth the ever-living... No, don't smooth out the teeth! If I can smooth the ever-living hell out of all this... Just like scrape. Like... I don't know that I really like the way that this chin is going, if I'm being real with you. I think we just get rid of the chin. Well, not the chin entirely, but like the weird goatee thing that I'm doing right now. Getting rid of features like that is just a pain in the ass with sculpting tools. So you've got to give me a moment here. Just got to smooth it out until it's gone. And then what? Actually, that's a good question. Can we like inflate this a little bit? Smooth it back out again. We'll get somewhere with this. We can still have that triangular feel to it. What if we try to pinch this actually? Probably need to do the multiplane scrape a bit more first. But that gets in the same situation that we were just in, I think. So maybe actually, like, just don't do that. Just make all of his features up here a little sharper. I think that does a lot more. What the fuck? Where am I? Hello? I'm inside his tooth. Okay. Yeah, I think just making all of his facial features sharper like this actually does a lot more to make him more dangerous looking. So let's do that instead. Skull looks a little bit like the Grinch. I suppose there's something to that, yeah. Again, we just go over the lines that I already previously created and sharpen them up a little bit. I think that will do a lot. It's already a pretty like sharp model, to be honest, so it's not a lot that needs to be done, I don't think. And then for detailing, I think I'm gonna apply a little bit of extra texture to this one so that it feels like he's like a lot more like damaged. So we can like do like clay strips maybe, and then use this texture and size it down a fair bit. What does that look like? Yeah, that's kind of what I'm going for. That's kind of, yeah, that's it. And then in the colors, go back on the contrast ever so slightly. I say go back, not add more. There we go. That's too much. That's too much. It's gotta be quite subtle. I don't know, maybe just a normal clay brush actually works. No, definitely. Maybe with the texture though. Maybe with the texture though. Strength just needs to be a lot less, and I think the clay strips works better. Add some stitches on the forehead. I don't know that stitches does necessarily makes a lot of sense for a skeleton, right? Or do you mean like cracks? Because that would like pretty significantly change the shape at this point. Which I don't really feel like doing. But somehow this does make it feel like this is an older skull, right? We've got all those like very clean skulls. And this skull is going to have like a lot more texture to it. So I think this ends up working out quite well from like a visual storytelling perspective. We can still have it be quite sharp, luckily. It's just adding texture. Which will also differentiate the skull itself from the... We don't even see this part, so who fucking cares? We can add some in the inside of the skull. We might see into there a little bit. It's not that important. But if it's fucking up like that, I'd rather just... It's not there. Yeah, I think I like this. Now, that does mean that I probably should do that for the actual, like, arms themselves as well, right? Probably. 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 Well, that's a lot of work, is the issue. But I don't think I want to do it procedurally, so let's move on to the arms and do it there as well. For that, we're definitely going to use dynamic topology though. I'm quite happy with how the model is coming along. So that's quite nice. If anybody is just like joined, if we turn on like the clothing for him as well. Like this dude is gonna fuck up your day. Right? That's the general idea, anyway. Like, give him a massive fucking scythe, and you're in it for a bad time. Now, let's sculpt these fuckers. With, yeah, I know there's a mirror modifier on it, I don't care. Oh, actually, and this is probably, yeah, topology. So this way it shouldn't impact the backside, right? So if I just draw, no, it still does, it still does. Is it face sets? No. There's one of these things that, oh, it's normal. Hold on, it's area normal. No, that's still... Fuck me. One of these things... For texture painting, you can just say, hey, don't paint on fucking back faces. Can we not do that for sculpting? Because that is kind of bullshit. Eyes will be on fire. Eyes will be something like that, yeah. Not entirely decided, like in a lot of detail on it yet. Probably in here now I think about it actually. So yeah, that's probably area normal, and then the limit will be 100 degrees actually is probably... What the actual fuck? Can I just fucking do a thing? What if I sculpt on the view plane instead? I don't want it to impact... Why would I ever want it to impact the backside? Well, that's not fair. There's definitely... Front faces only. Fucking thank you. How difficult can things be? God fucking damn it. So, that's that. How's everybody doing? Because I am doing significantly less fine than I was 10 minutes ago. I was doing fine. Was very happy with this. Then Blender decided to be a bit of a bitch. And now I'm annoyed. And then we definitely like want more wear and tear on the joint areas, even though I don't think we'll see those. We definitely like just from like, again, visual storytelling, right? And visual storytelling is just a very fancy way of saying, hey, I've got an idea and I want to sound smart about it. This is going to be the material. But it's specifically because this is like going to be the normal map data. It's much easier to paint that on in the geometry for the high-res version. And then bake it into a normal map because it's like three-dimensional data. Instead of it being simply a texture that you paint on. Because this way we'll actually like interact with light and stuff because it'll be a normal map. That actually worked well enough. Welcome from Korea. I don't think anybody's ever... Well, probably someone's watched from Korea, but nobody's ever proclaimed it. So you're a first there at least. So that's neat. Welcome. I think at this point I can like increase the strength back up a little bit, right? Maybe not so much. A lot of this is not even going to be seen. Why do I give a shit? Like the hand will be seen though, so for the hand we probably want more detail. The hand will probably like get quite a bit of screen time. I imagine there's going to be like a cutscene before the fight where the boss summons the weapon. And I have to imagine that that's going to have a shot focusing on the hand. So for there the detail actually does matter a little bit more. Yeah, okay, good. I have, I think, a video on normal maps in Blender. I don't know if I have a video on baking normal maps. I think I do. But baking normal maps in Blender kinda sucks. Not gonna lie. It's really iffy. That's why I don't like doing it. Like in Substance, it's literally as easy as, hey, you have a project file in which you have a low poly mesh, which is going to be the mesh that eventually like things get projected onto. So that's UV unwrapped and stuff. And then you can just say, hey, this is the high poly version mesh. Put in like a couple of settings, and it will just make you a normal map. In Blender, you need to like kind of do the same thing, but you need to make like a texture, have that texture selected, and baking that texture to like the specific texture node that you have, but only within like the specific material that you have. If you're working with multiple materials, that can be a little weird. I'm not a huge fan of the Blender material workflow. Like I use it still to this day. Like I use both. Sometimes I'm like, it's convenient to do this in Blender, it's fine. And sometimes I'm like, actually, let's do this in Substance. But I understand that Substance Painter is like, what is it, like $20 a month? Which is like definitely not something that everybody is interested in. And to be fair, I probably don't use it enough to be paying that. So I probably should just like make temporary materials and stuff until I actually get to like the art stage of the development, and then get the subscription instead of having it now and like only using it once or twice a month. That would be a better use of my time and money. But I like part of game development for me is bouncing back and forth between different disciplines. So doing some programming for a month, and then doing some art for a couple of weeks, and then doing some level design, and then going back to doing some programming. Like I really like bouncing back and forth like that. But it does mean that you're a little bit less efficient in like being able to cheese subscriptions like that. Substance Painter is really nice. If you have to buy like the Lifetime's license, which is also available on Steam, that's like $1,000. That would be a lot. But the subscription version is I think like $25, and you get Substance Painter and Designer for that, if I recall correctly, which is nice. But that's also like 2 programs to learn. But Substance Designer is especially for like making like procedural material or procedural textures. It is so nice compared to Blender. Like Blender doesn't even have a blur node. What the fuck is that even? Like, why doesn't Blender have a blur node in its material graph? Why? How is that acceptable? And it's not like a thing that recently has become an issue, right? That it's been the fucking geometry node has a blur node. Like you can blur geometry data, which is just smoothing things out. Materials still don't have a blur node. Like that is honestly like just not acceptable. Like, it's honestly just straight up bullshit. And just like that, there's a lot of like material function stuff that Substance offers you in like Designer, but as well as Painter. Like there's a lot of much more intelligent like edge detection stuff in Substance Painter. That is really nice. Like if you want to do anything very serious with Blender for materials, you need to do like very low level math in order to get a lot of things right. Like you can program your own blur just through pure math nodes. I do think that you have like a limit on like a material can only have like 4,000 nodes or something like that. So even there you're limited. But you know, Ain't nobody got time for that. You have access to all the math that you need in order to reproduce anything you need. But that doesn't mean that it's a good excuse for a lot of things that are like pretty basic features, again, like a blur, just to not be there. The amount of time that you would spend on reconstructing a blur, which ends up looking not as good, by the way, as just a normal Gaussian blur, would be worth that like $20 a month if you spend a lot of time in this, which I don't, admittedly. But Substance, like both of those programs, are really, really good. .3ds Max, Maya, Substance Painter tools, standard in Korea. Yeah, I think Maya is pretty standard still in the industry worldwide. A lot of people are moving over to Blender, and I think like for modeling and sculpting, and for a lot of things, Blender is pretty good. And I've never really worked with Maya, so I can't really say how like the modeling workflow for both of them compares. But generally, like Blender is pretty good at everything, but it's not amazing at pretty much anything. And that's kind of like the thing, right? It's an amazing free tool because it's pretty good at everything, but the moment you like hello? Why don't you do anything anymore? No dynamics apology. Okay. Like the moment like time efficiency starts becoming an issue, Blender falls off in a lot of ways. I also moved away a while ago, I made a video about this even, from animating. Wait, why are these bones fused together? I didn't notice that until now. They are not. Okay, good. But I stopped animating in Blender as well because I'm now doing that pure in Unreal Engine. Unreal's caught up enough for that to be worth my while. And it just improves my workflow. It's not like Blender is bad for rigging and animation. Quite the opposite. It's one of the things that it's actually pretty good for, I would say. But having to like go back and forth between different programs is just like not very optimized for like workflow purposes. So I now do all my animation within Unreal itself. And for similar reasons, I do my texturing in Substance just because it saves me time and it looks better. Like I've got enough shit to do as is, so I can't be bothered making everything from like scratch. I'm already making a lot of assets from scratch. I don't need to like make my materials from just pure math. That's taking things one step too far for me. Blender also has a normal Y inverted for some reason. Does it? I don't think it does. Do you mean like the Y up axis? Because that is hotly debatable whether or not the Y or the Z axis should be the up axis. I do think that Z axis up is more logical, personally. But I mean, either way it works. You just got to be aware if you move from one program using like one coordinate system to another, that you export or import in the right ways. Of course. This dude is gonna need like 4 different 4K textures in order to get all this detail across. That said, though, like the hands are probably gonna be a material on its own, and then like the cloak's probably gonna be a material on its own, and the skulls are gonna be a material combined with the rest of the skeleton, I think. So the ribs and the spine and stuff. Does Wonder have the Y information in normal maps inverted? Could be. I don't know, I've never really run into that. Like, I've run into the opposite issue with, like, working in Unity, where I was like, why do these things, like, look so weird? Why is this, like, lighting glitched? Turns out that because Unity uses Y up, its normal maps also use Y up instead of Z up. So all the normal maps that I made were fucked up because they were all Z up normal maps. So I needed to convert those, which is really annoying. Like, it never once crossed my mind that because the coordinate system is different, it would also deal with, like, normal maps differently. It makes sense. Like, after I figured that out, because somebody pointed out in the comments of the video where I complained about Unity looking like shit. Which was only like 60% for clickbait purposes. Somebody pointed it out because it was a legitimate issue that I didn't understand. And I was like, okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. That's just me being an idiot. But it's also really annoying. Because at this point, I am just too used to Z up. Because, again, Blender does it. I suppose I also sometimes work in After Effects with 3D assets. And that is, like, Z is depth. I suppose that makes that a Y up system, but that's such a, like, 2D environment that doesn't really feel like it's the same thing in any way. Okay, this hand is also thoroughly corroded now. My god, that does make the face look a lot more evil, doesn't it? Like, going back right now to, like, seeing the face again, that looks really evil. OpenGL is Y plus, DirectX is Y negative. I did not know that. You can import to Unreal and set inverted normals. Yeah, you can. Like, Substance just has a preset for Unreal, which is nice. So you can just say, hey, what I'm doing here, I'm going to be exporting that to Unreal Engine, so you take care of it. We've already done that. Now it's time to do this one. Which I suppose we don't even need to do these top ones, do we? Maybe we should copy this over first, actually. Because I think this works fairly well as just the normal low poly. Like, we just go into edit mode. Yeah, we definitely should just copy this over real quick to have a low poly version of it. Before we go doing weird dynamic topology things. And let's also do this. Yeah, exactly. Dynamic topology. Come on. Of course. Hold on. we need to add these first. Okay, so now we can dynamic topology. So now we can do our stuff. Again, I don't really think that we actually need to do these bits. Because we're only going to be seeing the bottom ribs. So why would I care otherwise about the top ones? But you know, there might be like a reason to do it at some point. Like if I want to have a cutscene where like the fucking robes burn off or something. I don't expect to be doing anything like that. But still, having to go through the entire texture like baking process again just because I want to make a change like that would be annoying. And it's really not that big a deal to just do a couple extra brush strokes here. So we're going to do that. Because this doesn't need that much like extra detail to it, I don't think. Just a little bit of like wiggly, woggly, timey-wimey things. It's probably all that we need here. I mean, the iPhone and Android charging thing, if we're using that as a, like, I was going to say metaphor. It's not really a metaphor. A comparison to the OpenGL and DirectX thing. That only happened because the European Union was like, hey, Apple, if you want to keep selling iPhones in Europe, you better get your shit together. So unless the EU really gives a shit about, like, coordinate systems in rendering, which it probably doesn't, because that doesn't really have much to do with, like, consumer protection. At least the EU isn't going to worry about that. But there's also, like, what does either party stand to gain by adopting the standards of the other than a lot of work to probably redo quite a bit of, like, that code base? So that could be problematic still. I don't know too much about, like, both parties to know what would be expected of either of them in that regard. But let's hope that they get their shit together, because competing standards is always a nightmare in anything. Or you can just be Apple, and when you're forced to adopt USB-C, instead of doing it, you can just start moving toward, like, portless phones, which is what it seems like they might be doing. Just going, like, full wireless. Like, they, of course, don't have a headphone jack anymore. No phone, other than, like, Fairphone, I believe, has had wired, like, mini jacks for a while. But if they're also going to go full wireless charging, they really don't, like, need a USB port anymore, which would suck, by the way, because then the only way to transfer files would literally be through the cloud. Like, just being able to hook up your phone, like, to your PC at all, or to your Mac, I suppose, if you're using an iPhone. I have an iPhone and I use a PC, but I got an iPhone because of the camera and the LiDAR scanner, which I've literally only used once. So, was that a good use of my money? No. Will I be getting another iPhone when my phone plan renews? No. I will not be getting an iPhone again. I only got the iPhone because of the... I think I might have fucked something up there in the background, but we're going to ignore that. I only got it because of the LiDAR scanner, because... credit what credit does do. Apple is literally the only phone manufacturer which has a phone with a LiDAR scanner, which is really nice for, like, 3D area scans. Which I figured, hey, that's maybe going to be, like, a fun thing to do. I can just, like, scan a 3D area and then import that into Unreal, and I have, like, an interesting, like, start for a for like the base of a level. I did that once to like try it out, and then I've never actually used it. So fun in theory, in practice, turns out not actually that relevant. Yeah, most engines will probably just take care of that for you, so there's no real reason, I suppose, to even worry about both of those standards starting to line up, because like if there's already like automated workarounds in place, like who even gives a shit at that point, right? Come on. Pivot point is in a weird place. We're almost there. I think that's it. I think we've also done the ribcage now. Actually ended up going pretty well. Yeah, the mocap is also nice, which I, in the future, could see myself using, but for the time being, like, the game I'm making right now, and that game which I'm going to be working on for quite a while longer, like, all the animation stuff is so fucking, like, custom in it. There really needs to be animation. I can't get away with too much mocap. Like this guy, how am I going to mocap this dude, right? I suppose, like, the arm bit of the animation, but I can't very well mocap a flying skeleton. There's gonna be some issues in that. So I don't actually use that. But for a different project that I have in mind for a potential game after this, which is quite far in the future, just putting that out there. Like, that's not a very soon kind of thing. I'll also have a lot of animation to do, but also like a lot of stuff that is more like humanoid as well. So for that it might be relevant, but by that point I'll just... Well, those don't line up at fucking all, do they? Oh, don't care. At that point I'll just look into it. Maybe I'll get another iPhone. Maybe I'll still have this iPhone by that point. I don't know if I'll sell this one or not. Hello? Why, you know... That's why. Again, these bits are not even going to be seen, so I don't know why I'm bothering, but... don't care. It's not even that difficult to just like go over, add a little erosion. I was going to do this one segment at a time. I think that's actually a horrible idea. I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do it like this. Like one side at a time. I think that makes a lot more sense to me. Did you test lip sync MetaHuman for iPhone? I have not, because I tried doing some MetaHuman stuff for a project that I'm working on for a video for later this year. It's probably going to be like a summer kind of deal. I'm waiting for Unreal 5.4 to be released because it has like better auto retargeting, and I like that. Specifically because it's going to be for just like a YouTube video project. I don't want to spend too much time like animating stuff. So if I can just auto retarget Mixima animations onto different skeletons, that would be great. So I'm waiting for that, and then I'm going to be working on that project a little bit. So I tried MetaHumans for that project because this is also going to be a project that has like more humanoid characters in it. And man, like if you just want to make like a very generic looking human, or you use like the facial scan feature, I suppose, that gets you a little closer to like a more unique personality of the person that you're like scanning. But it's very limited in what it can actually produce. So I'm like not the biggest fan of it. Again, if you're literally just like making a game for which you have actors, which then also like do the mocap and stuff like that, and your actors look like your characters, for instance with like the Jedi Survivor series, right? I don't know if that's made in Unreal. It feels like it's made in Unreal. There, that makes total sense, and I can definitely see those characters like being metahumans. But like for 90% of what I would want to make, I just couldn't give less of a shit about metahumans, if I'm being honest. Like, I just do not care at all. Anything I want to make is stylized. I have very little interest in making like photorealistic worlds and characters. So probably should have been doing those side bits all along, shouldn't I? It's a bit late to realize that now. So that's why I don't really care about that. Though I suppose you can have the metahuman like facial capture and remap that onto your own characters. That probably would work fairly well still. But still, it's pretty realistic for what I personally like to both play and make. I prefer much more stylized stuff. For which some people will say, why the fuck even are you in Unreal Engine then if you want stylized stuff? And to that I say, because it's a nice engine, even for stylized stuff. It's not like stylized means that you have to work in Unity. I gave Unity a shot. I just was very happy when I went back to Unreal. I don't know, I think Substrate is going to stay experimental for a while. Probably. I don't know. It's very interesting stuff, but they showed it off like a year and a bit ago now, and it's still experimental. So maybe I don't know. Maybe they were a little premature on that. I don't know if this was a good like idea for a pivot point. That's actually pretty decent. I mean, all the realistic stuff coming out of Unreal Engine does look a little samey. Which I'm not the biggest fan of. But like they're all trying to imitate real life, right? So obviously they are going to look a little samey. It's just like I like a game that has identity. And I'm not the best artist in the world, as like the past 2.5 hours has probably shown everybody watching this. So I try my best. I do what I can. To like have an art style to my work that is like close to somewhere in the neighborhood of consistent, at least. It's not really very consistent. I'll give you that. But it's a little like if Tim Burton made Final Fantasy. Is how I would explain my art style. Just like significantly less impressive than either of the components, obviously. And then I'm talking about like earlier Final Fantasy as well, not like Final Fantasy 15 or 16 or whatever, because those then again go for a more realistic style, which I am not a huge fan of. Not everything needs to be realistic, people. Things can be cartoony, and cartoony doesn't need to mean like happy-go-lucky, which again, I refer back to Tim Burton. You can have dark, cartoony vibes, which is what I'm trying to do. Hence me sculpting texture onto a spine at the moment. I mean, I wouldn't say I hate Unity, but like okay, funny thing is, the project that I'm working on right now, I've been like working on this project for about 1.5 years, I think, all things considered. It started out as okay, I feel like I'm somewhat comfortable in Unity now. Let's make a fun little project, which then grew way out of proportion, to test my skills. And after like 3, 4, 5 months, something along those lines, I figured, you know what, actually, this game seems like it's actually like worth putting some more time into. But this engine, maybe not so much. So then I rebuilt everything that I already had made back in Unreal Engine. And, well, that eventually led to where we are today. I'm still a little annoyed that I am now working with an engine that is kind of shit for 2D. Because it's just nice to be able to like somewhat easily also make 2D games. And I know that there's like the Paper ZD plugin, but the plugin exists and is community kept because Unreal itself, like Epic, stopped supporting it, which is never a good sign. So now it has a shelf life, is really what it comes down to. Like in a long-term perspective, it's gonna have a shelf life. We're relying on community upkept plugins, which I think are even free. So at some point, like, the incentive to keep working on it, or the people who are working on it right now, are going to move on to other things because life gets in the way and it might get handed off. But at some point, that's just going to die, right? That's how that works. And at that point, Unreal itself is just gonna like not have any really proper 2D tools anymore. The same thing with like their HTML5 support. Like there is still a community upkept version of those plugins. They don't officially support it and develop it anymore. At some point, that's gonna die out. Well, for HTML5, I don't really care about that. For the 2D stuff, that's a little bit more bothersome for me, which is one of the reasons that I tried Unity out in the first place. Like, okay, I feel like Unity isn't going to ditch its 2D. And I don't really see myself making a lot of 2D games, but it's nice to have as an option, especially for like if you're doing a game jam or something like that. If you want to make something that feels like it fits better in 2 dimensions. Fun little project here, fun little project there. Like it's an opportunity that the engine at the moment still has, but is at some point going to lose. A game is supposed to look like a game. Well, yeah. But there's a wide interpretation there, right? Because I don't personally love it most of the time when games look like movies. I haven't played any of the more recent Assassin's Creed games, but that's kind of always the thing that was like, man, if we just take Assassin's Creed and make it a little bit more Prince of Persia, which was originally what that was, more or less, to get that stylized look back, I think I would like Assassin's Creed like 35% more. And especially nowadays, like I'm so done with Assassin's Creed, it's not even funny. But it just had to be realistic, and in some cases, that works, right? Because the more serious moments feel very, very impactful because they are so realistic, and it feels like you're watching a movie. One thing that comes to mind is in Assassin's Creed 3, where they're like standing on the roof and what's this Templar face dude is yelling about like order and well, his perspective on the world pretty much. Like, I feel like that scene really works for me, and I think it would have a different impact if it was a cartoon character. Not to say that it can't work with a cartoon character, because like if we look at Avatar: The Last Airbender, the Netflix series was recently released, so it's been on my mind. Like that's very cartoony, because it is literally a cartoon. The Netflix version isn't, but it's literally a cartoon, and that manages to like hit home things very hard as well at certain points. So it's not like being realistic graphically is a necessity for things feeling impactful, but it certainly helps. I just don't feel like every game should look like that. Like, Zelda shouldn't look realistic. Looking at you, Twilight Princess. I like the vibes of Twilight Princess. I don't like the fact that they, for Wii purposes, try to make it look a lot more realistic. Like, that game still looks decent to this day, but not in the same way that Wind Waker still looks amazing to this day. How much more do we have left to go on this thing? But okay, we're we're getting there. And after Zelda Wind Waker, like, a lot of people, or a lot of game studios rather, really started going all in on like the cell shading thing, which is like, it's a neat style. It was overused a little bit for a couple of years there. So that's the other side of the coin. It's just like a game should have an identity and not just be everything looks the same. If everything is cell shaded, it's not fun either anymore, because everything is now cell shaded. Nothing has an identity because of the cell shading. And an identity for like an art perspective goes deeper than just like shading techniques, right? There's like texturing and just character design and whatever. Like, A Hat in Time also is cell shaded. I don't think a lot of people are going to be comparing that to Wind Waker. Most people will compare that probably to, for the most part, Mario Sunshine in a lot of ways, because just like the art direction and stuff is closer to Mario Sunshine. But like the actual shading is very cell shaded. Mario Sunshine also, but to a much less extreme extent than either of these other examples. And obviously nobody is comparing fucking Borderlands to Wind Waker. Well, some people are, but like, the fact that they both have a version of cell shading is kind of where the comparison ends. And then there's like the entirety of the rest of the game around that. So a game having identity goes deeper than just one thing. So you can definitely just like work with realistic graphics and still like have something that gives your game a unique identity. It's just usually not a good sign when it graphically doesn't show an identity, to me anyway. Okay, spine's also done. Fucking hell, that took a while, didn't it? Is that a spine? Yes, it is. I don't know when that Twitch message came in. Probably a while ago. I was rambling there. Yes, that is a spine. If you're still here, this is what the whole fucking dude looks like. You know, there's some things clipping through here. Let me try to fix that real quick. Which? This one. And now we get to Reed apologizing. Well, not now. After I fix this thing up, I'm ending this stream because it's been a long one. Like, we've been live for about 2.5 hours. I need to like sleep at some point as well, because like, I believe it or not, actually I have actual work to do sometimes as well. Okay, something's gone a little fucky there at the back of the skull as well. We can try to... Oh yeah, that takes a moment, doesn't it? I do have a Discord. I think there should be a link in the description to the stream. And if not, go to any random video on the channel and it will definitely be in the description there. If it's not in the description of the stream, please do let me know real quick, because that means that I should add it to the default settings for the next stream. Okay, can we just smooth this out and then... Why am I in edit mode? Hold on. That's not what I wanted. It might have actually been nice for pivot point purposes. We'll be fine. Can we say, hey, we want to flatten this thing out a little? That makes it clip through itself. It's there. Okay, that's good to know. I always get a little mixed up because I live streams, right? You know, nobody's going to be looking at the back of this guy's fucking skull. They're going to be too busy running for their fucking lives. It'll be okay. It'll be fine. We'll be fine. I will not be fine if this thing keeps threatening to crash on me this much, though. I will actually, like, fucking just lose it. I wonder how many faces we're at this point. I feel like it's probably gotta be over 12 million at this point. Let's grab hood. Pull it. What the fuck? What the fuck? Is that a back face? That was a back face. Okay, that makes sense. Fair enough. Fine. Not going to render an engine anyway. Who cares? Well, for baking reasons, I do care. Let's go back to layout mode here real quick and see how many... Oh, we're at 12.5 million. That's actually like a pretty good guess on my part. Wow. This is the wireframe. Guys. This is the wireframe. This is just like solid black. Fucking hell. Okay. And the only thing that's even like slightly see-through is the cloak itself. Everything else is just black. Okay. Well, I suppose next time we'll be doing some retopologizing. I don't know why they're in a funny voice. I'm so tired. We'll do the retopo on this thing, which is going to be a lot of decimating. But specifically the cloak, I'll have to manually retopo because it needs to have decent topology to deform at least. And then we'll start the rigging process as well and do UV unwrapping as well, probably. Maybe. We'll see. Depends on how much time we have next time. So that'll be on Friday, same time. This time I'm going to try not to forget which day it is. Usually I stream on Mondays. I just entirely forgot yesterday to stream until it was like 5 minutes before. And I like to at least like publish the stream an hour before, otherwise like nobody's going to show up. So I just forgot yesterday. So that's why we're doing it today. I'll be back on Friday doing all that stuff, and then next week hopefully we'll have this guy ready to go into Unreal and see how it looks. And then we need to start animating him. Oh my god, this is gonna be so much work. Anyway, I'm gonna like get a lot of good sleep tonight. I'll tell you that. So thank you everybody for hanging out. We had our max peak of concurrent viewers ever today as well. We were at like 17 or 18 at some point. So that was fucking amazing. Maybe I should stream on Tuesday more often. So yeah, see ya.